It's Feed the Trolls, and I think this is probably one of the coolest lineups that we've had on any of the episodes. I have got to work with Freya loads at different events, but we've never actually had a chance to like sit and talk together on a camera, Freya, because you always work a different desk or a different shift, so we just see each other in passing. So I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've been a big fan of watching Feed the Trolls, but yeah, I feel like every time we come into a studio, it's like ships passing in the night or in the day. Like you're coming in, tag team, boom, you're on the desk, I'm done. So it's actually nice if you get to talk about CS for once.
It's going to be so much fun. And of course, we're also joined by who Twitter calls the serious woman hater of esports.
Okay.
They're going to be upset about this one.
Yeah.
Look at you on a desk with two women. What has happened?
I mean, the worst thing is I'm actually fulfilling none of the audiences. The ones that want me to hate women, I'm doing a really bad job for them. And then the ones that think that I don't, it's not working either, is it? So, you know, I'm ruining both. Pleasing no one.
Ruining. Pleasing. Everyone's going to be super upset about this for some reason.
Sure.
We're going to be talking about Vitality and it's pretty much talking a little bit about what we expect from them in the major. And there's going to be a conversation about the inevitable roster shuffle, which I presume is coming, which is kind of where I want to start because in the last few days, there was, I think it was yesterday, I've been trying to stay off social media because I'm taking like a week break before the major starts. But I did pop on to see one of these Twitter accounts saying that there's this rumor that they're trying to sell Apex. The CEO from Vitality is trying to sell Apex, but Apex doesn't know. And there's been like all sorts of backwards and forwards.
By the way, it is also technically not like, here's the difference. I should state at the outset. It's not like a Harumi rumor. It is from KRL, who, to be fair, it does seem like he's super hooked into the French scene. And as far as I know, most of the things he said do seem like they've probably got some grain of truth to it. So that was kind of a bit telling in itself. You know, that's an interesting angle.
Did you not think that there's like, I always say where there's smoke, there's fire, because this is not the first time this conversation about Apex leaving Vitality has happened in the last 3 months.
And I think he himself said as well, didn't he say it was Falcons that he said they were going to sign or something like a few months back, right?
I think it was, they said Falcons. I don't know if he said anything about Falcons specifically.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was him, but that was definitely circulating. But then that was kind of at the same time as a shit ton of other names of circulating, right? Like there's been a lot of people rumored to go there. I don't know. Did the official Vitality Twitter account put out something saying like Apex isn't for sale, but then
but even then, if you notice, they just did that thing. It reminds me of the one that happened last year when, if you remember, G2 just did that thing like Monacy is not for sale for any amount. And you're like, what? Instead of just saying KRL is lying, Apex isn't leaving the team. Like, I think there's a key distinction there of just saying he's not for sale. Because in a weird way, I also sound weird, but that also actually sort of makes me think, Sam, that KRL might actually have better sources than people realize. Because it's almost like they don't want to piss him off by calling him out by name, you know. By the way, I've been called out loads of times, even when I was right by certain teams who just don't want it to publicly seem that way. So that in itself almost made it seem like more valid, if you know. Because in that scenario, you also get all that social media clout if you dunk on the account. Like, imagine if the Vitality account just replies to KRL's tweet like, that isn't true, he's not leaving. It would be a mad drama, wouldn't it? But they intentionally were just like, apropos of nothing, Apex is not for sale. Like, oh, okay, well, nothing. I guess nothing to see, right? But even that's a bit weird. Why are you putting that post out? It's a bit weird, right?
I think that there was, if I read somewhere correctly, and it was, my sleep schedule's messed, so it was probably at 4 this morning. But it was something on HLTV. It's I think it's the esports manager or something of Vitality did a quote to HLTV that said, you know, if we sell players, they're in the conversation. If those conversations are happening, we would never do it behind a player's back. Then there
because KRL also claimed that like Apex wasn't aware of this, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So there was that saying we don't do that behind our players' backs. And then there was another, I think a follow-up question from HLTV about the Spinx conversation. And it was like, well, if, you know, no comments, but if our players wanted to leave, we would chat to them about. So it was all a lot of nothing. But I think for me, what the moment I read that, which is kind of concerned me, is how the hell your team is just qualified for the major and now this is all circulating. Do we think it's going to have an effect on the Vitality we know? Freya, what do you think?
I would, a completely biased take, I would hope not, because I think for Vitality to still be in the conversation of, you know, one of the best teams in the world coming out of 2024, sure, obviously Cologne was a massive milestone for them to finally lift that trophy, in Apex and ZywOo particularly. But, I mean, that's been the only trophy this year, right? Like, we do need, I think, a major to kind of punctuate what has been, albeit quite a consistent year from Vitality. Maybe, you know, post Cologne was a bit tricky, but you know, consistently making playoffs. It's just, if you have a team with a ZywOo who could be the #1 player coming out of 24, with a Spinx, even though he's been a little bit up and down, I'd say with the Flamesy, are you content with just one trophy this year? Absolutely not. I do worry because of the emotional angle of Vitality. I think they're still one of those teams that you can put in a conversation and say they are emotionally charged. Whether that's led by Apex, I don't know. Whether Apex is now realizing that maybe there's these conversations going on without him, I don't know how that will personally impact him. Obviously, good signs for them going through the RMR and looking great with Mezzy back in action. It was interesting in Singapore as well, because the vibes with Jax being there, and this isn't shitting on Mezzy at all, but the vibes with Jax, Apex was so consistently happy and just laughing,
right,
having a great time. There was like probably one of the hardest segments I've done for a really good reason was when we're standing in front of the booth. Like I was there with Stico, and it was the first time we got to see Jax coming on. And we now have these really big program monitors, and obviously the players can see the program monitors moving around. And anytime Jax was coming on, he could see himself, and he was just like nudging Apex, like, "Oh my god, it's me! I'm famous! I'm famous!" And and just like making jokes about everything. It was so funny. And then like G2 had come over, giving him a fist bump. And he was like, "Yeah, I love you guys." And then he turns to Apex, he's like, "Those are the fucks that kicked me, you know."
That's actually fire. Okay, that's fire. I like that. Okay.
He was such a good vibe. And you could just see kind of, again, I'm not saying that this is to any discredit of the actual Vitality roster, but being able to see Apex in that kind of situation, and they did, I think they did decently well in Singapore, all things considered.
Sure.
You know, considering Mezzy wasn't there. Obviously, Mezzy has come back and looked really solid at the RMR. But that is something that we know of Vitality, is that they can be emotionally charged. Like I'm sure, Sam, you've seen or been privy to some conversations when you walk past some of the
no doubt when they go out after they lose map one and they're having the smoking session, I bet they're all arguing.
I mean, even in the booth,
sure.
like boom, they've lost a map. And there's been some moments where, you know, Apex has been very, very vocal with his frustration.
Oh, I've no doubt, yeah.
I think that's what you sign up for when you join a team with Apex as an in-game leader. I don't know. That didn't really answer your question, did it?
Well, now the joke is when Apex next year goes to an event and meets with Jax, he can turn to Jax and say, "See, Vitality, they're the fucks that kicked me. See, there you go." Write that down. Someone write that one down.
Well, that is because that's the thing. Apex is quite like you said. He is emotionally charged. He reads you can read his emotions on his face. So I was like, I don't think that this is going to go down well if there's truth to it. Like that for me is a huge concern, because they do look really good. And while maybe they've only lifted one trophy, they have had an extremely consistent year in terms of making sure that they finish as high as they possibly can in a lot of tournaments. And I do think that they've kind of peaked, in my opinion, at the right time. I think that Thorin, I'd argue they are a contender to win this major.
I mean, I would personally, if I'm not taking, like, Na'Vi's the easy one because the floor's so good, but I think it's only the fact that G2 just won this blast that makes anyone put G2 second. I think most people would have had Vitality second, because it's like you say, the floor of the team is crazy. Like, a bad tournament for this team is to, like, narrowly lose in, like, the round of 6 or something, or lose, like, an epic semi-final where someone has, like, the tournament of their life. Whereas, actually, like, if you go look at the other squads, like, most of the other squads have been really up and down. Like, sometimes the G2s of the world and the Spirit go last place or bomb out super early. So I think a lot of people thought, especially because of the Cologne win and the consistency, even when they do badly, like, this probably should be second or third favourite for the major. In fact, I even think the craziest thing about this drama is, I think it's both at the same time. Like, I think it's plausible there is all this drama with Spinx and Apex, but that they also could win the major and still break up. That's just how ridiculous, one, French CS is, and then two, how wild, like, these superstar teams are. Like, by the way, in a way, like what Freya was talking about, I actually kind of respect that, though, because that is more like real sports. Like, if you're playing for, like, a massive football team and you're not going to get, like, an extended contract, you don't just give up and go, "Oh, well, I guess we just lose this year." Like, you still play. You even play if you hate this teammate or you don't get along with them. You want to win, like, this tournament, this Champions League, this Premier League. You worry about that later. So I think that's the one angle I have, which is, I think when people hear the team's dead, that's more like, if Complexity was dead, yeah, maybe they'll just come last place and not even make the major. This team, at the end of the day, like, if every time you have a chance to win a tournament the size of the major, you take it. Like, you don't even know what the lineups will be for both teams next year, so who even knows? So I actually still think the joke is they could actually win, but then also still make this move. Like, maybe, by the way, like you're saying, Freya, like, because they did only get the one title, maybe, I don't know how this sentence can be uttered, but maybe a Cologne and a major isn't enough in a season for some people. Maybe you really do want more. So if so, then you might leave anyway, even if you do win.
It kind of like makes me think about, what was it, the end of 2022 when like the French iteration of Vitality came to an end, and they weren't necessarily doing badly, right? And then Apex did that interview where he was like literally shed a few tears and was saying this wasn't my decision, but you know, Shocks and that to be leaving the team.
Oh yes,
it's not, you know, something that I was necessarily even in the conversations of. It was a managerial decision, and I'm going to stick by it because I.
Which is interesting. Bear in mind, this person apparently now came out. A separate person was like, you know, we always ask the players because, as you say, it was implied they just got those Astralis, like Zonic and the two Danes, and just sort of told them like, hey, good news, it's not French anymore, and here's Astralis. Like, what? Like, apparently that happened.
It's also, I mean, we're just playing in rumors now, but it's so much fun. It's coincidentally, today, Falcons announces Snappy's benched. The rumor was that Apex was going to Falcons. Then it was kind of shut down. Now I'm sitting here going, well, maybe the Falcons conversation continued without Apex.
So
that's even also so naughty because think about it, right? Yeah, Falcons isn't in the major anymore. Vitality's still playing now, and if you're Falcons, like, you know what? Oh, is there an IGL in the mix? Well, we're just going to publicly bench our IGL. So, you know, enjoy that major, Apex. Like, what's going on here? What implication are you putting out there?
With Simple, like saying, you know, them saying you're not going to renew his contract, him going out on, you know,
Telegram,
social media platforms, Telegram, saying like, I'm not doing this. Is there a world where Apex and ZywOo go, and there's Nico?
Ooh, no one actually thought about that.
Into a contract, right?
In theory, but then again, it depends.
No way.
To be fair, they didn't put an article out. ZywOo wasn't for sale at any price, did they? They didn't mention him, so who knows, right? Someone comes with the money. There you go. Also, by the way, if you're a Vitality fan, wouldn't that be the worst trade of all time? Like, we get Snappy and washed ZywOo, Simple, but you get Apex and Prime ZywOo. Like, that would be a pretty bad trade.
Yeah.
I like that idea that Zonic was like, I couldn't build my super team, so I'm just going to go get the one that won me a major and try that again. Like, it's probably a workable solution.
I don't know Spinx how thing is ZywOo would fare without Apex, though. I think that's where I have these reservations, because he just has never had to. He's never really been. I mean, I'm discounting Alex in this discussion.
No, sure. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Like it was at different times. But yeah, we just haven't had to see him perform under a different leader. I'm not saying that I would hate to see it.
No, but you know the funny thing? I know people have their reasons to dislike Apex. Maybe they don't like his antics or they think he doesn't frag enough or whatever. But that's the one thing I always thought people didn't give him his credit for. He does seem like the ZywOo whisperer. Like, think about how many stories there are where he actually does, like, you can see him on camera do it or behind the scenes, apparently, like, sort of kick ZywOo up the arse when he's not playing well enough or they need him to come live or, like, Simple's team's beating us or something. Like, actually seems like Apex has sort of been like the hype man, like with boxers where they have the guy who hypes him up or whatever. So I actually sort of do wonder about that myself, because people do act like you could just put ZywOo in any team and he'd perform the same, but who knows? He seems like he's actually quite an emotionally driven character, right?
It's curious to me. I'm just curious now about what happens. If Vitality wins a major, maybe this whole Apex thing doesn't go anywhere, but I do, like I said earlier, smoke fire. It kind of brings me around to the Spinx conversation, because it's pretty much all but confirmed that he's going as well. I know, Thorin, you did a Snake and Banter episode where you were going on about this, the dead team idea. I mean, G2 with Nico, they know he's leaving, but they're playing so well. Is it a good thing or a bad thing for us that we have these teams where it's kind of known that the roster change is coming, and yet the teams are still, it's not even performing. I mean, they're the ones that are in contention to win the whole damn major.
Yeah. Actually, the maddest thing is, if you think about it, right, like I just said earlier, if you ask people on paper who were the three most important teams right now, they would say Na'Vi, G2 and Vitality. And we're supposed to believe two of those teams are dead teams already and will definitely not have this lineup next year, even though two of those three could yet win the major. In fact, I even said the joke would be, let's just have G2 versus Vitality in the final of the major and then neither team keeps their roster. Like, well, at that point, this is the reason why I say that, because it's fine for the teams. And like I say, I actually think those players are all professional enough and great enough at their job. They'll all try and win, and they'll try and win a major on the way out the door. But it sucks for people like us, the ones that are trying to build like a broadcast storyline or a narrative in the career. Because, like, for example, the second one of those two teams in my hypothetical final wins, you want to have the conversation. Can they repeat? What does this mean? Will they have an era? Well, it's like, imagine if someone just goes, actually, no, they're just both going to change players. It's like, oh, well, see you next year, I guess. We'll see if they're any good. Like that, I think it's just a bit of a bomber narratively. I actually think for the teams, luckily, like I say, when you're at this kind of stratosphere where players are just really the best in the world, they do generally seem to be able to sort of bench their emotions or their feelings, or maybe actually, there's sometimes I do think happens with teams like G2. I think sometimes you can almost like channel it, because you just have kind of like, I don't give a fuck energy, you know, which can be good. That can mean you don't have the same pressure sometimes. So even though I wouldn't say it works every time, I've definitely heard behind the scenes, even though it doesn't always come out, when teams did play badly, but it's cause a player news, getting kicked or something. This seems like the rare cases where actually they can perform almost as well, even though they know the team isn't going to exist anymore.
To play devil's advocate and take a slight tangent, is this going to be a consequence of now having the major at the end parts of the season? Like, as much as we were always asking for this, and I'm so glad it's happening, are we now seeing the consequences of our demands actually being met, you know? Like, because this is the moment where people are going to be, like, historically, it's always been January has been like just a mental time with rosters, right?
I mean, I will say that is how it works in League of Legends and Dota. Like in Dota, after TI, the teams all change the rosters. After the World Championship in League, that's when the free agency period is. That's when you change. So actually, I do think we are shifting to that model. It seems like we're going to have the major at the end of every season. So I think most teams will do this because also, maybe that's why I said Vitality might be the rare case. For most normal teams, if you win the major, that's enough. You're going to at least let the roster run out like another season. So I do think for most teams, it's going to be the ultimate, like, almost like do you pass the test or do you fail and then you get kicked? So I think a lot of other teams, maybe not Vitality, but maybe the other squads will think that way. Maybe like FaZe is thinking that, for example, if they don't win, probably roster moves, you know?
I'd argue, I think in January 2025, we will see pretty much all the big teams change.
Ooh, okay.
I really think it's going to be like, this is my spicy take. I think we're going to have this like massive reshuffle happening. I'm just more curious about how we think it impacts teams when the conversations are public before the major. So there is like I said, there's obviously the Nico thing was he is definitely going to leave. No one's denied it.
Sure.
Now you've got the Spinx one, it would seem is pretty much set in stone as well. Is that a good thing though? That's what concerns me. Is that a good thing when you're coming into the major to have those conversations so public?
I think it really depends on how players are kind of viewing the competition because that's kind of two ways I think you can look at it. It's obviously from a team aspect is what we from the outset probably most likely look at it as and going, you know, this organization, this team has lifted X trophies with this roster core, blah, blah, blah. But if you're a player, you've kind of got to be selfish in some aspects, no? Like, even if you're Spinx and maybe you know, maybe you don't know exactly where you're going to be going, you're either playing to prove that this is a mistake that they're kicking me. It's going to happen whether I like it or not. But you want to prove to other people that it's a mistake and you want to prove that, sure, you want to be picked up by an org. So I think it just depends what kind of mentality you have as an individual, right? Whether you can kind of flip that switch and go, okay, this trophy is for me. It's not for the four other guys that are sitting beside me. Like, I want to do this to, be selfish isn't the word because it's, I guess it's playing a bit more individualistic than perhaps we've been used to seeing or
no, what you're saying makes perfect sense. It's actually a concept in the NBA, by the way. What they say in the NBA is when you're on the last year of your contract, so you know at the end of the season you're going to have to renegotiate, players just magically look like they play 25% better individually because the idea becomes, like in your analogy, if like I came to a position in a basketball game where normally I'd go, pass to him, maybe I just take that shot myself and then I get more points and at the end of the year I'm like, my numbers are up, so can I get a new deal? I think that, in a way, that's also why sometimes the dead team plays better. Obviously, everyone can imagine the opposite. That's the one thing I don't as much worry about with Vitality. But I'll give you an example. If it's a smaller team, if anyone heard, like when there's, like I'll give you an example. You know when Skulls was in Team Liquid? If they'd have had a rumor 2 months in, like, actually, some of them don't think Skulls is that good and they might kick him in 3 months. When someone like Skulls then sees that and gets the feedback loop on the internet, that everyone knows that. And then every fan, you know, every time he does badly, there's that thread on HFV, Skulls, come here, you are kicked in 3 months. I think that's the player it might get to. I think they might play worse. I actually think it's the other way around. I agree with you. If anything, the joke would be, this might be Spinx's greatest major ever because presumably he wants to like get a mega contract elsewhere. So you might actually see him just go fucking ham, like have the greatest selfish POV of all time.
I was going to say, I think that's a good for him. It's going, okay, I know I'm leaving. This is like a great advert for me. So that every other team looking goes, damn, we want him. And like you said, you could negotiate a better contract. Nico's obviously going to Falcons. For him, it's a matter of going like, I'm going to play really well because I'm going to walk into a lineup full of a bunch of people that probably also have giant egos, and I want to make sure that like I can swing my dick the furthest, if you like. So you play really well, right? I mean, that's what I imagine. I saw Simple as well because he posted on Telegram about how he's not staying on the bench for long. He's going to play as hard as he can. I wanted to be like, you had the perfect opportunity right now. Like if you had just done magical things for Falcons people would have gone, damn, there's Simple, he's back. Like, he should have done that. So I suppose in a way it's a good opportunity. The question is, we should have probably done this at the end, but we'll just jump around because it's fun. Who replaces Spinx?
I think that's a really hard question. Yeah.
Yinfa, please. Like, if I've had so many teams are after him, right? Like, there was a lot of whisperings in Brazil of not necessarily Vitality, somebody else. Coming in. I'm sure everybody will know who that is.
I mean, the big names should be Vitality, G2, FaZe. These are the ones people think of, you know.
Yeah. I think FaZe was kind of.
And unfortunately, is Falcons not in that? Is Falcons?
Well, the recent rumor claims that he is. Everyone now claims that's where he's going. But again, who knows on those ones?
But who was that from?
Yeah, exactly.
Who started that? I feel like you could just throw anyone's name into the ring and say, "Oh, they're going to Falcons." Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, of course they are." I think for Yinfa, Falcons would be at this point in his career. Falcons would be stupid.
The wrong move.
I think.
I agree.
Like, doesn't make any sense. I see why he would go to FaZe, just because everyone from ours goes to FaZe. But I really, really would love to see him on Vitality. I think the one issue that has kind of seemingly plagued Vitality when they've had those kind of new players coming in, and I don't know why this is. Apex always seems to say, like, they're not being confident enough. They're not being selfish enough. They're not taking as many liberties as I would want them to. And maybe that's a, case of coming along and playing besides ZywOo, who obviously, if, one of the best players, if not the best player of 2024, giving him as much space to succeed as possible. I don't think it's ZywOo demanding that at all. But maybe there is a bit of an intimidation factor with that. But I wouldn't see Yinfa as falling victim to that. I don't know. I think he'd be probably the best pickup, I think. I don't know.
Where are you sitting, Thorin? Who would you want to see replace him?
That's what's so tough about this move, because I have to say, to even think of that, I have to agree with the premise that Spinx should leave or would want to leave, because I don't even know why. This is what's weird. If you remember, the original rumor, which actually came out after they'd won IEM Cologne, bizarrely, was that Spinx wanted Mezzy kicked, if you remember, and that then they wanted like Hunter or something to come over. And I can't remember if it was Spinx was going to leave because of Mezzy, and then Hunter would replace Spinx, and then Spinx would go to G2, something like that anyway. But the idea was like it was Spinx that wants to leave. Now, I find that bizarre, because the two people I would have figured in Vitality would be like, look, we're staying and we build around us, is ZywOo and Spinx. Like, for me, they're the two best players, and they have no overlap in how they play. So I think they could coexist for a long time. So I actually think it's really hard to replace a player like Spinx. This is one of the reasons I find this whole Vitality drama really crazy. Like, I can sort of get the idea, maybe the other players want a different IGL. Maybe they think a different IGL would make their team better. Or in the Mezzy case, that's just a classic one where star players sometimes don't appreciate the role player or the guy who's like setting them up, because they think, well, why isn't he fragging? He's not saying, bro, he's helping you frag. You know what I mean? That's easy. We all know those ones. But those ones are easier because they're lesser pieces you bring in to enhance the others. For me, I don't think there's many players can replace Spinx. Like, by the way, at the end of this year, he will be a HLTV top 10 player in the world. Like, well, there's only 9 other names, and one of them is ZywOo already. And by the way, Flames is pretty up there. So I think if you go and look, the other problem you have is, surely I need now a star player from someone else's team. Like, at this point, am I taking someone who's left over on, like, I don't even know that Hunter's a star player. Am I taking over from G2? Am I taking a different mouse player? Am I getting Exertion instead of it? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like the other thing is, do the other teams want these players to go? So I also worry for Vitality that they're going to do like a downgrade on paper, because I don't think there's many players better than Spinx.
Do we think he goes? I mean, that is the question. Do we think that there is any truth to the rumors?
I'm not sure, just because of the whole situation prior to Cologne. So I think it was after Blast London that Spinx went to Extaz. I'm not sure the whole like Mezzy situation, but it sounded like he basically said, I'm not content. I haven't won anything like we should have. I think I'm better than this. I want the option to explore other opportunities. To which he said, sure, if that's what you want. And then nothing happened. Okay. Which is where the question marks for me kind of left. And obviously then they go to Cologne and then they win, and then the vibe and mentality seems to change. But it's that period of kind of, okay, you're allowed to explore, but then nobody's actually taking you necessarily. Yes. That makes me go, well, was he just frustrated? Understandably so, with like 6 months of, you end 2023 with a couple trophies, then it seems a bit barren for the first few months of the year. You get, a decent amount of playoff spots. I obviously don't know the inner workings of what happened with that whole situation, but yeah, that was where I was left scratching my head a little bit. Was okay, well, how serious was he? Was he actually going out and approaching teams? Was there just no room for him to join a specific team? And I don't know where he, particularly with all these G2 changes, and if, Nico obviously going to Falcons, where does Spinx see himself going? Is this a case of
true
phase? Yeah. Is he thinking of going to Falcons?
I mean, what you're sort of saying is the bizarre thing is if he wants out and he's had all this time, you'd think there'd be a destination, wouldn't you? You'd think he'd have like a spot, like, you don't just want to leave. The grass is green. You want to go somewhere better, right? But the problem is, I agree with you. It's hard to know where that would be. Like, is it lined up, for example, that when Nico leaves, he's got a massive offer from G2? That could be a good angle. By the way, the interesting one is, notice he's the only player that can't be put into that mix of maybe he joins Falcons because it's just implied, I've heard internally, that they're not going to sign Nertz and Spinx for an obvious political reason because of their nationality, right? So that's not even something anyone speculates about, they'll notice. I will throw this out there, though. Like, one detail, this is like such a mad reach, Sam, but you know what? We haven't got anything else to go off, so this is all we're working with now. I normally don't ever reveal this, right? I have a rule. If I ask a player to do an interview, but the player says privately, no, I'll never reveal that publicly because I actually then think, I don't want like my fans to put pressure on them or be like, hey, why are you doing an interview with them? Like, at the end of the day, like it's actually like their prerogative whether they do the interview. And I view that as like they're giving me something, right? But if the org says no, but the player says yes, I absolutely don't give a fuck. So here's a very spicy detail for you. What if I was to tell you right around the time that if we now know after Cologne, that was the drama that Spinx was thinking of leaving or wanting to go. What if I told you suddenly it made a lot of sense that just before that period when they were really good around the player break, the exact time you'd ask, I'd asked not once, not twice, but 3 times specifically Vitality for me to interview Spinx. And Spinx had agreed that he wanted to do it. But when I asked Vitality, they've never declined me an interview ever before. Normally when I send that email, I want to interview this person, they agree, I'll do it on this day. Normally they just do like the approval. Essentially, they only do that system just so that it's not some like, I don't know, weird political foreign newspaper that someone doesn't know. And you're like, whoa, stay away from that, Essentially, you're always going to get the approval. So in every other case, it would always just be like, yeah, sure, go ahead. It sounds like you've got it. They bizarrely kept saying no 3 times, even though in this case, I don't think they remember that I told them the first time, but Spinx already agreed to do it. So they were even doing ones where it was like, each time it was like they were fobbing me off. It was sort of like, oh, he's busy at the moment. Or like, you know what, I think actually he needs like a week off. Or, you know what, all the players are actually out of the country at the moment. They kept doing all these. By the way, my favorite one, Freya, was they said, it's the player break, so the players need time off. Now, you know this. The players will always tell you, if I want to do an interview, do it in the player break. That's when I've got all the time. So this doesn't actually mean anything concrete, guys. But I'm just saying, if I, Sam, had a player who behind the scenes is like, I want out, but we haven't been able to make the deal happen, I can't lie. I probably wouldn't put him in front of Thorin with an open mic and no supervision at that point in time. You know what I mean? So even though I wouldn't do anything, I'd just ask the historical stuff about 2011, mate, or whatever. But I think that implies to me, maybe there was this discord within the team the whole time. And maybe, like, put it this way, I sort of agree with you. There certainly can be made up rumors, but this one seems like it's almost been sustained in different ways through the last 6 months. So now it just seems like it would be really strange if next year Spinx is there and he does an interview. I never ever planned on leaving, and I always loved staying there. That would seem the weird thing at this point in time. Like, I sort of do buy the idea there's at least some sort of discontent there. And at a minimum, Vitality's, been trying to ease his staying in the team or asking him, can we make a different change? You can even imply maybe the 2 moves are connected. Maybe the moves are either Spinx wants to go elsewhere, he doesn't like the team, or if you bring a different IGL, maybe it could even be a Snappy. Spoiler, are you ready, guys? Everyone forgot this. Snappy was Spinx's IGL in Ents. Everyone's forgotten that somehow. Like, he's going to be sort of available. Like, again, I know, I agree with you, Freya. To a fan, we just look at like the current situation. Like, well, Snappy's done terrible in Falcons. Players are different. They go off shit like, oh, I like the way he called, or we get along on the same vibe, or he'll give me my positions. Like, I don't think that's even crazy. So I even wonder if half the thing in Vitality is just, either can we offload Spinx and replace him, or can we get the person that makes Spinx stays? Because it's also a bit weird, notice in all this. Here's the last thing I'll say. Why does Spinx never have a comment either way? Because again, you think how fast players go to Twitter. He could have gone on Twitter at any point. Okay, this is all bullshit rumors, guys. Don't listen to it a lot. He could even have just done the classic one where you say nothing else, like the Vitality one. You just go, I just like everyone to know, I love my teammates and Vitality, and I want to be here for many years to come. That's even like the American PR approach to quell the drama. Instead, he said absolutely complete radio silence. As far as I can tell, he said nothing about this topic, which when you think how gobby players are, that makes me think there's something to it. There's something going on behind the scenes.
What is more important, Nick? I've never thought about it in that light. Keeping Spinx, making him happy with a different in-game leader, or
it's interesting, right?
Do you think it's more important to keep Apex and...
What would you pick? If I made you the GM, which would you pick of those two?
Oh God, I'm just terrified of ZywOo having anything to worry about. I want him to be as comfortable as possible. I want him to be in the best position to succeed. No bias here, of course.
Okay.
So I would... Is that mental that I'm saying?
No, I was thinking the same thing.
We want him to win, surely.
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
Yeah, I try to keep Apex. I think if Spinx has already expressed interest in leaving, which we know for a fact, then all right, do it. Is that just me being really petty? I don't know. This is why I'm not
maybe that implies something about how you operate in your life. You thinking of leaving? Get the fuck out there. I never wanted you anyway. You know what?
I don't want you.
Yeah, exactly. You know we're back now. Don't even bother saying sorry. Get the fuck out. All right.
But the one player that I feel like I have no opinion on is I have an opinion on his personality, but it's only because he just never speaks and he's always smiling, is ZywOo. Like, the guy is just like genuinely always nice, always happy, never looks sad, but doesn't say much either. So I can never figure him out. But I imagine from what I've seen, he seems, I don't want to say soft, because obviously to play as well as he does, that there has to be a little bit of like attitude there. But
sure,
he does come across as someone who might be like, well, I like playing with Apex, but if you changed it, like, so be it. And then in that case, I'd be like, okay, well, let's take care of like long term the two best players on the lineup. You know, Apex, we can replace the IGL. He's getting on. You know, maybe it's his time. Then you keep those two happy. I mean, I don't know.
Okay. I think in some ways, I think we can combine your opinions and solve it. Just ask ZywOo who he wants to keep.
Yeah,
whoever he picks, that's the lineup for next year. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, man, we've cracked it. We've cracked the code.
And also, that's the best angle ever. If you go to Apex, instead of saying, "Hey, sorry, it didn't work out," you just go, "Look, ZywOo said he didn't want you. Take it up with him."
Imagine. That is, I mean, we'll do a little bit more.
That's pretty gangster, isn't it? I know.
It's pretty insane. We'll do a little bit
more. You can't
argue with that,
can you? It's pretty good.
That's such a cool
if
thing.
If you're number
Imagine
one of 2024, you get to be the GM. There we go.
Yeah.
He's going to be fired up. We've never seen him.
In fact, that's what you do. I've solved all the problems. You say to ZywOo now, if you're the MVP of the major, you get to pick who stays.
Oh.
Now go for it. Now, as a GM, I've now doubled done my job. One, I'm going to win the major. And then two, I don't have to make the decision either. So perfect. There we go. And also, even if every Vitality fan loves Apex, if they know ZywOo picked him to get kicked, though, I don't think they would mind the move as much. So all I'm saying is, just put it all on ZywOo's shoulders. Literally everything in the org.
The entire organization, everyone's investments, that's all rests with you now. Let's just play the roster rumor game anyway. So say that the rumors around Apex are actually true and he's probably already been sold and he just doesn't know it and they've told him it's not the case to try and keep him sweet for the major. Who the hell IGLs? You want to do a snappy? Is that really the route to go with this team? Who else
that's the other angle, isn't it? Because as much as everyone's looking at those players on Mouse, like Exertion, maybe FaZe wants him, Jimpat, everyone wants him. Everyone's forgetting Shui's also right there. Like, that's the player that... Remember, I've heard there was rumours like some of these big odds already tried to get him before he went back to Mouse. So I would assume he has to be on people's radar. I've even heard before Kixon went to Heroic, some big odds were inquiring about this guy as well. So I actually think there's a world also where you also have to ask these younger guys. There's another angle people haven't thought of. What if it's two players? What if it's you get Yimfat and Shuhei to one of these teams? Could be Vitality, could be G2, whatever. Like, maybe you do a package too, because these are all great players. And it's assumed, at least, this is why I feel bad for Mouse. Unfortunately, in every other team, we're like, well, why would G2 sell this guy? In their team, everyone just assumes you have to sell them. Like, they're all going, if they go, they go. And it sounds like, unfortunately, like Mouse to FaZe, a lot of them do want the step up to go to the team that wins everything. So a lot of people just look at Mouse and it's like, which do I need? Do I need an IGL? I'll have you. Do I need the ARPA? I'll have you. Do I need, everyone? Even the Swedish teams like Will Broland. It's like, everyone's just dibs on that player. I'll have him after you, Mouse.
And they've just built this beautiful facility. All that money just for them to be sold. Maybe that's how they paid for it. I would like Shuhei. I love the Shuhei angle, actually. Now I think
it'll be fun, right?
The snappy angle, I get it with the Spinx thing, but maybe this just doesn't matter on paper. Just from a personality angle, like Snappy is one of the most stoic, down-to-earth people you will ever meet. Like, he is the personification of like a responsible dad. I'm not saying that he probably, couldn't go out and have some fun and, get a bit wild, but I think that's something that you look at Vitality and go, just the vibe check of the team.
There's a bit more of a younger sort of team, isn't it?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah,
that's true.
And they're used to like having a bit of a laugh and, you know, like things getting loud. Again, I don't know how much that actually matters on paper, but I just feel like the personality of like Snappy to Vitality doesn't really add up for me. But from a tactical side, would make a lot of sense with the Spinx reunion if Spinx stays. Yeah, I don't know.
By the way, that would also in some way be like out of the frying pan into the fire for Snappy, because you know you just got all the hit from Falcons. Well, remember if you're in Vitality, my joke always goes: if they're in like if ZywOo's in a 1v1 to win the game or lose the game, if he hits the shot, ZywOo carried the game. If he misses, the fans go fucking Apex, even though it's like what he wasn't even in the because they can't blame ZywOo, can they? So in this scenario, Snappy, you would just be also getting blamed for everything in Vitality, mate. So either way, it's going to be tough.
Hear me out. Maz wins the major, and then all of these top orgs' hopes and dreams are dashed because the organization keeps them, and they decide to stay together because now they've won a major.
In some ways, that would ruin the whole scene, Sam. Is if Mouse wins already, and then secondly, every other team's like, well, shit, we were planning on getting a Mouse player, so I guess all our dead rosters are just our real rosters again. Welcome back, Spinx. And here's our new snappy and simple Falcons. Like that. That would be pretty wild. That would ruin everyone's plans for sure.
I like the idea that could happen. So I'm going to kind of cross my fingers and hope for it. Let's get back onto the Vitality major run though. So if Mars doesn't win the major, it needs to be Vitality.
Yeah.
They won Cologne, and they have been consistent. We said that. But do you think that there's a specific reason? I mean, Freya, I'll ask you because I know that you've watched this team so closely. Is there a specific reason we haven't seen them lift more trophies this year, do you think?
I think this it might sound like a very generic answer, but actually having ZywOo, Spinx, and Flamesy all peak at the same time, it's like a once in a blue moon. And it happened during Singapore. It happened in the Mouse game. And they absolutely destroyed them. And that was with Jax on the lineup as well. So it was like, okay, this is, this is looking solid. Obviously, we don't expect them to go and win this event because of the stand-in, but maybe already surpassed our expectations. I just think it's so rare. And even when you look at the Cologne run, Apex, I think that was his best rated event since World Finals the year previously, which they won. And I mean, him, obviously, the whole narrative with 10 years in the making, him that trophy evading him so many times. It's one that he's always missed out on, 2 majors, but no Cato, no Cologne. That was obviously what we were really focusing on. But that was, I mean, just a huge blessing for Vitality to have Apex show up in that fashion in that grand final. It might sound like a really easy cop-out answer, but it is just the consistency of having all 3 of them show up at the same time, and also having the element of ZywOo's hunger. He's not, he's almost the antithesis of Simple. Like whenever we'd have that sort of Simple ZywOo conversation head to head, Simple would always say, I want to be the best, I want to be number one, don't give a fuck about ZywOo. ZywOo's kind of just like, I'm just here. It's a team game. Shout out to my teammates one time. Like he doesn't have that ego, which I think he should deservedly have, because he could be number one this year. I'm not saying that's necessarily an issue for him in Vitality. I think, his demeanor has always been kind of praised for being so humble, but I think there is an element of like, it does frustrate me that he isn't as impassioned and maybe willing to, go out on a limb and say, yeah, we're going to fuck them up. Like, I'm going to be the best player on the server today. Never heard him say that. I think it was in the Cologne MVP interview where, once again, he said, props to my teammates, which is obviously well deserved for them. But, he finally said, like, yeah, I'm kind of feeling like I'm one of the best players in the world. It's like, finally, it took you how many years to actually admit that, yeah, you actually might be one of the greatest to touch this game. Again, I don't know whether that's actually an issue for Vitality, but just from the outside, it does frustrate me that it doesn't seem like there's that kind of Simple-esque burning passion or hunger necessarily consistently for ZywOo.
No, by the way, I actually think that manifested this year in like as a proxy. That was what the whole discussion about why doesn't he AWP as much was about this year. It's not really that he has to. He's an amazing rifler, by the way. He could easily be the best rifler. But the problem is, I think people's assumption, I sort of agree, is when he AWPs, it makes him more like the kind of player that we think of who like dominates the game. So the perception people had was him saying, like, I don't feel like AWPing or I'd rather rifle, was also sort of saying, I don't want to be like the star or the key piece all the time. Like some games I want to sort of chill. Because I kind of agree with you. It's It's funny that people think I'm a ZywOo hater. It's actually the opposite. I actually think he can be even better than he currently is. And by the way, he's already like probably a top 5 player to ever play any version of CS. Because I do look, and I agree with you. There's just times where he loses and it looks like, and this happened in a bunch, in my opinion, of the semis and the quarters they lost this year. There's just times it looks like he was just like chilling for a map, or there was a map where he didn't play like super confident or aggro, like you say, like the good thing about Simpo is, the thing that was a problem in his career, his big ego, eventually became like a weapon, didn't it? It was like the ultimate confidence. I'm always going to take the duel. I'm going to dominate. I'm going to intimidate the opponent. I'm going to make them always have to worry about me. Sometimes it feels like ZywOo sometimes just goes along to get along, as it were. And so I think, first of all, if he's the MVP of a tournament, you're probably going to win it. Like, he's really fucking good. Then also the other thing for me is, I do think within their team, that they clearly have like some sort of like a slightly strange mismatch in terms of like people's philosophy. Because for me, Spinx and Flames have like polar opposite ways of seeing CS. Like, Spinx seems to want to play way slower and more passively. Like, they had to like bring him out of his shell in this Vitality team. Flames is the opposite. He's the guy who has no brakes. He just presses W, doesn't he? He just goes all the way through. So to me, that's why I actually say, even though a lot of people criticize Apex, I actually think he's done a very good job. I think he's got some very distinct pieces that don't have traditionally any real reason they should all work together. And yeah, they haven't always won, but I think sometimes it has been on players or individual performances and stuff. And I definitely agree with the latter point. If they are a team where, like, if they'd have won more tournaments, I can guarantee all 3 of those names you said would all be HLTV top 10, like you normally get with the way, like, if you win like 7 tournaments, your big names go there. But you're right, they almost never, it feels like almost never, ever all play well at the same time. Even though in theory, they're all distinct roles. Like, they all could. There's not even an overlap. It's just, it feels like the game Flames has the game of his life is Spinx's worst map. And then when ZywOo doesn't turn up, that's when Spinx does his greatest ever performance, but it's only just enough to lose by 2 rounds or something. So it does feel like that's the nightmare. Because I always think whenever I look on the Wikipedia for the tournament, every time I see the roster, I'm like, this should just win the tournament, man. This looks mega. But then it always is missing a tiny bit in the server for some reason.
I know that I'd be curious to hear your opinion on this, Sam, because like a lot of the times when we talk on the desk, like Vitality CT side is brought up, quite consistently, and just like the positionings of some of the positions for Spinx and Flamesy specifically, a lot of times are brought into question, right? Because is this going to inhibit Flamesy from playing that aggressive style that he really loves? Like, obviously, Apex is playing in some of these positions that maybe you classically see some stars in, right?
That's an interesting point. Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how they were decided, but I'd just be curious to see if you guys think that that's actually an issue that does plague Vitality, because it kind of seems like it just depends on the week, the tournament.
I know that fans do wonder on that one. I think it's another reason some fans want Apex kicked. They can't tell, is he taking certain spots like that because a star player says, I don't want to play that spot? Or is he saying, like, hey, I'm the leader and I'm going to take this spot so I can frag out? I think some people think the latter and think he's being like a bit cynical and getting his own numbers up. Whereas I actually couldn't, even though I know Apex, I couldn't tell you on that one. I feel like it could be either. It could be a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Who knows? What do you think, Sam?
I don't know where it sits. I'm trying to think about like Apex and whether it is like I want to take that position, but I don't know. But I do think that there is a very big juxtaposition between Flamesy and the way he plays, like you said, and Spinx. And I wonder if that's also kind of, we speak about Spinx not being happy there, but I also do think that is not firing on all cylinders at the same time.
Sure.
Where you have, the only time I ever saw this work in terms of like having that very hot player and the slower player, if you like, was that ends run that Snappy had, where you had like Nerds and some Pius who were like aggressive and fast and colorful in and out of the server, and then the more sort of like structure on the other side. And the only time I ever saw it work was in Ends that 1 year. And then after that, it didn't. And I feel like maybe that's Vitality suffering from the same thing of not being able to get everyone off, is because there's kind of this weird clash in the server of how we're going to play this, who's going to go where, and trying to, I suppose, accommodate everyone becomes a problem. Because now you're trying to accommodate everyone's specific needs, but you're never going to be able to do it. So someone is going to have to give at the end of the day, right? So
I mean, I know that's one thing Apex himself has talked about ever since they got Spinx, is that he actually says he had the epiphany that if you have an international roster where you don't all come from one nationality, he thinks you can't play like super slow CS, basically. To him, that's, you can do that if you're like all Danish, all Russian or something. You can all like com super well, you play together in the same cultural mix. He thinks if you play with like a super team, like a phase type squad, you have to play up tempo. But the downside of that is you are definitely going to have times where you make like a quick call and someone just fucks up the play and it looks like a bad call from the IGL. It's one of the tough scenarios I think they're in as well. Because that's why I say, I don't, people act like it's a great roster, and Apex is like, oh, what's he doing with this roster? That's like herding cats. That squad's so totally bizarre. Think about it, right? You've got situations like our superstar player might be the only superstar player ever who doesn't have a superstar player ego. Like, what? That's normally like, you'd think that'd be good, but that could be a negative. Like, meanwhile, maybe someone like the second star, he thinks it's his team and it should be played in. Who the fuck knows where? Maybe by the way, the reason I say I can't tell on the Apex one is because there's also a world where Apex used to be a star player once upon a day. So there's times he might make a play where, look, this is the downside of being older. Sometimes in his brain, he thinks he is that Apex from 2014. And when he pulls this duel, he's definitely going to frag Malbs or something. But then because it's actually 2024, Malbs just shoots him straight in his head and then he's dead and goes, oh, sorry, now I can just help the guy in the B. So, yeah, watch out, they're coming from the... Like, I don't know. That I could believe, even though I like him, I could believe there's a little bit of that. You know, he thinks he's rolling back the years.
I think I'd take that on like a slightly different tangent of like a lot of those positions is where you glean a lot of info.
That's
right?
true.
And I
think to make a call
true as well.
Yeah, I think that Apex is one of those people that like, you know, isn't afraid to get down and dirty and makes some of the best decisions when he's got all the information laid out.
Yeah, but whereas, by the way, you might not know. Maybe one of those stars is silent. Maybe they don't talk. Maybe they wouldn't give you the comm even if they saw it. You could be right, yeah.
Do you think that, like, for Vitality, like we've spoken a little bit now about what's sort of holding them back, but the conversation of specifically ZywOo's ego, because it's an interesting one for me. Like I said earlier, he's like one of the few players I've never been able to get a read on either, because like he just always seems really happy to be there and just really excited to play Counter-Strike. And I get nothing else from him. He could be the MVP and he's still like, just really happy to be here and playing Counter-Strike. Do you think that holds them back a little bit? Do you think if he was... I mean, Freya, you mentioned that if he was a little bit more confident, a little bit more like getting in your face, simple vibes, do you think that would be better for them?
I really don't know, because I think there's always that risk that you run, and we saw it with Simple in like the latter stages of, you know, CSGO, where if you can't walk the walk, don't talk the talk, essentially. Like if you can't always back it up, and that is the one thing that I think is the reason why we've got this real tight race for the world number one in terms of players, is there hasn't been like a consistent dominant player out of a ZywOo, m0NESY, or a Dom. They've all had moments where they've been, you know, null and void in the server. They've all had moments where they've been MVPs of huge tournaments. So I think it's that consistent level, right? And I think it is just part of ZywOo's character, and what makes him so endearing from a fan side of things is, you know, he is so damn humble. And I wonder whether just the amount of, I mean, comparing him from, you know, back in 2018 when he was on the stage in London and I made the worst mistake ever and didn't talk to him and say I was going to interview him before, and then obviously we all know what happened.
It would have been worse than he just wouldn't have interviewed at all. It's better that this moment existed. You don't go back and change that. That was good that happened. But the fact, and it was good for you. It's your moment. It's your breakout moment.
Exactly. And he's, I mean, I remember meeting him in Stockholm. That was, you know, obviously COVID happened. I hadn't actually seen him in person because I moved into desk hosting, and then obviously went back to interviewing just for a little bit at the Stockholm Major. So that was the first time I actually got to speak to him afterwards. And I was like, I saw him in the bar and I was like, I owe you a drink. I am so sorry that happened. He was like, no, it was great. Like great for, you know, my own branding. It was great for me as a player to kind of recognize that, oh shit, it's not just about playing Counter-Strike. I do need to have an identity. So I think it is night and day between what we saw from the beginning of his career versus what he is now. You know, he's good for like a laugh and a joke here and there. He obviously fits in very well with the team atmosphere as well. But there are obviously quite a lot of super vocal players on that team already. So I don't know how that would affect the balance of things if he did have a little bit more of an ego. And I also think if you are going to be, for want of a better phrase, like chatting shit all the time, you've got to be backing it up consistently. I don't see ZywOo as that character. I would expect that maybe more out of a... It's kind of interesting because the top three we have now kind of almost all suffer from the same thing of, you know, you don't often hear Donk saying like, yeah, I'm going to go fuck them up, or m0NESY for that matter either. I think because we've got such a competitive field now, right? So I don't know how much that would help or hinder a Vitality squad if ZywOo was.
Here's the thing, if you actually think it's a problem, I'm with you. I can't tell, because it depends on like the balance of personalities in a team, like you say. Maybe some of the others are egotistical, maybe actually having one less voice helps. But if you want ZywOo to be the player we're describing it, you want him to be more full on and be the guy who's like, I am the best player, fuck you, and watch what I'm about to do to this guy you think's the best, which is the ZywOo I want. Here's what you do, I can solve this problem. You know, earlier on we talked about the fact Simple won't be in Falcons. Problem solved. Since ZywOo, I don't want to be the star and I want to rifle. Then bring Simple in as the AWP. And I'll tell you what, we will immediately fix the situation, because there's only two outcomes. Either one, it's true, ZywOo doesn't want to be the big ego and he just want AWP all the time. No problem, Simple will do it. Or, I can tell you, I know Simple. I've literally listened to his practices when he was in Team Liquid. It won't even take 3 months. And then eventually the ZywOo you want will emerge and he will just go, get this Ukrainian pig out of my team. And he will fucking get Simple kicked. So either way, I can solve this problem for you. 3 months is all I need. All I need is just purchase Simple, make him, no, it's not a big ask, make him the AWPer and let him run riot over the team. And then we'll see, is ZywOo actually that chill? Because all I'll tell you is, I'm not aware of almost any teammate who's that chill when Simple's in the game. Like, he'll get to you, mate. He's the guy who absolutely is in your face. Like, why you throw that flash wrong? Like, I'm human. Like, be superhuman like me. Like, no, Brit, that's great. Nice standard.
There we go. So the solution is to break Vitality completely for 3 months, give Duncan millions so that he can get Simple out of his contract, and that'll be the solution.
You know, it's also the toxic thing about how I did that plan is, if it actually works the original premise, it's also just making my whole thing that like ZywOo's then like the sidekick to Simple. But don't tell anyone that. That's like a secret hidden benefit of my approach I'm trying to do here. Because spoiler, I'm just a Simple fan, Anna, so it's not biased on that one.
We know. I struggle with this particular one because when I think about Vitality, like, I mean, even when we were talking about the roster things, I think any change right now would be a downgrade to that roster, in my opinion. Like, I feel quite strongly that they make a change. Yeah, I don't think that there is a change you can make that makes this team better than what it is on paper. And from what we've seen in the survey, even if they haven't lifted trophies. And I also struggle with this, where I can't figure out, there's certain teams where you know if they're going to play against another team, it's like their kryptonite and it gets into their head a little bit. With Vitality, I struggle to find the kryptonite per se.
I don't think they have one. Yeah.
This is my... And for me, I'm like, again, it sits in the situation where I'm like, surely they're the sure bet for this major, because they just, like Freya said, if they fire on all cylinders and everyone is on that server and in the right space, I just don't think any other team touches them by a mile.
Yeah, I don't think that they suffer from what a lot of other teams suffer from with the kind of Na'Vi side of things as well, because obviously I think we would say that they're in contention to be the favourites for the major. But I mean that grand final in Cologne, like one of the best series I've ever watched. That Mirage was just insane. But the fact that they didn't crumble under that pressure that Na'Vi put them under. Sure, like last map wasn't like Vitality had basically just completely figured them out on that Inferno. But there isn't, you're totally right, there isn't that consistent team. Like, weirdly, G2 is kind of the only team that seems to really cause them a bit of pain here and there, but then it's pretty even across 2024
they're beating them a lot. If you think about the last 2 times they lost, one was like the Jax one or whatever. So exactly. And then the other one was like the equal playing out of his mind, like having like most insane rounds ever,
Exactly. Like Spirit doesn't, I mean, they haven't really clashed against Spirit too many times. But yeah, I totally agree. Like, there isn't that consistent, like, oh, okay, Vitality will do well up until they face this team, and then they're completely ruined.
They're also bizarrely the team that's almost never played Na'Vi. They pretty much only played them in that Cologne phase. So we also don't even know, would Na'Vi even beat them? They just somehow always miss each other in the bracket, don't they? So no, that's actually one of the hardest things. This is also why I struggle with the idea, like, that we all just accept the premise there has to be roster changes. Like, I look at the team, like, surely there's a way to make this work. Because another thing I think is a giveaway that they are a really good team is, think about their map pool. They have never had a bad map pool ever with this lineup. In fact, even when they had maps, they didn't play as much. So they didn't used to play the Anubis as much. They're actually really good on Anubis now. They used to intentionally not play Vertigo, so a few teams tried punish picking it. They beat them. They just won those games. Like, these aren't even the maps they want to play in theory. So you look at the map pool also, they always have like 5 maps they can play. Like, I actually think on paper, for real, this team is the only team that matches up against every single other team in the world well. Like, like we're saying, I don't know if anyone's a favourite over them. If the joke obviously being they just beat themselves, I guess, by that analogy, right?
I think that's what kind of upset me when I saw those tweets with the rumor stuff happening, because I just thought, why, if there's truth to this, why would you shoot your own organization in the foot, like right now? Why would you even enter into those conversations without your IG? If there is even a grain of truth in this, why the hell would you do that when you are sitting on what I think is it is arguably the best team right now? Like, why would you not be doing everything to optimize that? And I wouldn't want to change this roster because it's winning.
That reminds me of something. You've reminded me of something we didn't bring up, which was, I also heard, when I heard all that stuff I've mentioned in the past about Team Liquid, when they made that like Cadian super team that failed, I've heard one of the reasons why Team Liquid basically had to make Twists the IGL is because even during that, it wasn't when he was just in FaZe. I've heard even when he was in Liquid, he was getting the offer from Vitality of like, look, you can still come if you want. Like, we still want you. So that implies actually that this whole year, because they haven't won anything this year till Cologne, the whole year they were maybe looking like, is there an option? Is there someone who can bring in, who can bring this guy in? And it's just that he turned them down. He didn't do the deal. But that makes it sound like even before rumors came out like publicly through people, they've maybe been trying to do this the whole year. So to them, maybe actually it's neither here nor there that they won Cologne. Maybe they think like, we want to make this move eventually anyway. We just haven't found the right moment. So what I worry about there is that almost sounds like they know there's going to be the crazy roster mania right after the major. They're trying to get ahead of it. But I agree with you. The craziest part about that is, yeah, that makes sense if you're like FaZe that at the moment can't buy a spot in a final. You might win the major. Why would you ever risk that? Because especially because, like I said at the beginning, what I don't get is, surely winning the major does mean we fixed everything and we can just play the next tournament. We don't still have to kick the team after we win the major. Like, shouldn't that be like the ultimate test that we passed? But it just sounds like it isn't. It sounds like the fact you're inquiring in the market almost implies, even if we won the major, like Na'Vi in 2021 without losing a map and wrecked everyone, we'd still change the lineup, which seems a bit crazy to me, but I guess that just shows how people's perspective on the future is. I think that's wild. You got to at least have a chance to repeat, surely. Come on.
I think I just have mad trust issues with like the amount of fucking Vitality rumors. Yeah, is this a therapy session? Oh fuck, I'm in the wrong. I think I just have trust issues with Vitality and roster changes and the amount of conversations there have been around them, and then nothing's happened. So
what you just said there could also word for word be a quote that Apex could say. If you run it back and you think about it. By the way, Sam, I want to ask you a serious question. Look, you might like this lineup and they are really good, but when you say that it makes you sad to see this, isn't part of you like, yeah, spill the tea, give me the gossip, yes, sis, what's going on? Isn't part of you feeding off the drama too? Because it is spicy as fuck. Like, this isn't even just one player. This is like, is Messi getting kicked? Is Spinx leaving? Do they want Apex? Are they kicking Apex? Oh my God, Apex's twin had a secret baby within in Venezuela and it's come back to the town. Like, this is like some fucking Days of Their Lives shit. This is crazy. By the way, shout out to Vitality though. Even though your team only has 2 French players, you are absolutely keeping alive that reputation of the French scene for having the most outrageous dramas of all time. Just like back in the old Titan and Very Games days. This is brilliant. They brought it back. I love it. I love it. The backstabbing, the shuffles, all that shit.
You know, my favorite thing is the spice and the drama. That's like always. So I get way too excited about like roster rumors and things. But in the last few months, my attitude has changed.
By the way, I just want to say publicly also, even though I have to be careful how I say this, shout out for what an actually outrageous out of pocket joke that was about the Amaranth Yeast Beer or whatever. Like,
oh shit!
Oh my God!
Listen, it was within bounds, but it was metaphorically out of pocket. It's pretty wild.
Sometimes the problem is it just comes out of my mouth, and then as it's coming out, I'll be on camera and I'll be like, probably shouldn't be saying that, but then it's out there, so I just run with it.
Exactly.
It's happened a few times now. I'm trying to figure out how to control that better. But I used to get really excited about like all the roster rumors and like I loved the gossip, but in the last few months I've got jaded because I want the run. You know the magical Astralis run where you just had this lineup and they were going and winning everything. I want that. I'm so tired of like a team starts doing well and like Vitality's done well. They've consistently been up there. Yes, they've only won one trophy, but we all saw them in the RMRs. They look shit hot. Like if there is a team that has potential to win this, it's them. We've seen them against Na'Vi, who are the favorites, and I think that they look in Cologne. They look considerably better. How the hell are we talking about changing it? Like, why are we just never happy? Like, for me, I'm like, why can we not just be happy with what we have? We have this magical team that does these incredible things. Cologne that final was epic to watch. why the hell do you want to change it? Like, give
I
it
think
some
that's
time
even
and
an
see if
angle
it
I
sticks.
find weird. Is I would also say, if you think about Vitality, they're probably the best group stage team in Counter-Strike. Like every single group stage you ever go to that page on HLTV, ZywOo's just like the top rated player. He'll have like a 1.6 rating or something, and it feels like they always just easily cruise through every. Even by the way, if they play the team in the group stage, they're going to play in the bloody playoffs and lose too. So that does make me think like, in isolation, all factors taken out except the game, they are the best team, I think. But something definitely happens to them. Like if they're the team where if they ever get into a close game and they'll find a way to lose it by 2 rounds in overtime or something like that. It's like they've got like the anti-clutch factor or something.
Yeah, they win their opponent's map pick, but
they're ridiculous,
aren't they? Like what?
Yes.
What's going on here? I don't know whether I agree with you, Sam. I don't want to go back to those Astralis days. You know what? It's great for the history books. Loved, looking back on that, but the fact that just every tournament, it's like, oh, okay, cool, it's competitive up until the grand final.
Okay.
And then, it's a quick 2-0.
Fair point.
Obviously, it was a great time whilst it wasn't really a great time whilst it existed, but I like that we're in such a competitive scene.
Okay.
Obviously, then it does provoke, our teams wanting to get back and have an era, because I guess we kind of had. I mean, we'd say there was a period where Na'Vi could.
I mean, they were in every final, yeah.
Like I think that's the closest we've come to since then. Then we had like the phase moment as well, but I think this year, I think we would say, obviously depending on what happens in the major, that Na'Vi are probably the best team to come out of 2024, but it's not as clear cut as it was back in those Astralis days, right? And I don't know whether we'll ever get back to having that just insane dominance in a field of competition, because we've got so many more people entering, right? We've got so many more players that we know won't necessarily team up with each other and will still keep the scene really competitive. So I don't know, I think I'm kind of enjoying the different sides of the scene that we've got to see sort of post-COVID and post-Astralis just kind of blowing up. Haven't had that insane level of dominance over years, right? Like FaZe and Na'Vi obviously did some amazing things with majors and particularly FaZe back in 2022. But I don't know, I'm kind of enjoying it. I don't know whether that's a bad take.
I don't think it's a bad take. I'll rework this idea for you though, so because we're wrapping up now, is the idea of, do you not want to just see a team spend? I feel like there should be a rule that you have to spend 6 months as a team, and you have to work out whatever shit is going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like for me, it's kind of like an idea of like, I like to see the story build with the same roster. Like I liked when Na'Vi brought in Wonderful and everyone said it wasn't going to work, and then it looked really shaky. And then they just rose, and it was like I think people love that. You buy into that whole journey. For me, Vitality, the journey is still there. They are still, when we look at this roster, we're like, shit, if they're all popping off today, no one can touch them. I like that. I kind of don't want to see that change. And I hate this idea. And I think it's Kassad. I blame him. He planted the seed in my head.
Just blame him for everything. Everyone does anyway.
Yeah, it was his fault. He made this comment to me where it was here on Feed the Trolls, one of the episodes, where he was like, you can't just take a piece out and put a new one in, because that new piece will change everything. And that stuck with me for a long time. So I'm like, there's so much good in Vitality. If you change the piece, you might lose some of it. Just keep it. Just let it last for another 6 months. That's kind of
that's one thing. This is one of the points I made. I won't say who within Vitality, but put it this way: one of the people in Vitality literally just agreed with me on this point. They even agreed, like, why do we need roster moves? Because I said to them, bro, the point that people are making the mistake of in your team, if it's truly the players pushing for this, is a lot of those players are obviously very young. Like Apex is easily the veteran, and the joke is Mezzi's almost like one of the veterans compared to the others. Like Spinx and Flames are pretty young, and ZywOo's only ever been in Vitality. I was saying to him, just some of these players in these teams know that like it can also get worse when we change rosters. Like we're all saying it, like we don't accept what we currently have every semi-final ever, it feels like, and win a big event. We're going to definitely make the upgrade that definitely makes us like the Astralis dominant team. Like no one can know that for sure though. So there's also a world where on paper you might make the upgrade and then you might be worse. Like all of a sudden you might have the odd time where this can happen. You might not make a playoff every now and then, or you might have like a last place or something. Like they also haven't realized like the grass is greener phenomenon. By the way, I don't know if people know this, but I once heard someone say that apparently that is like a real phenomenon in real life, but it's to do with like light and how if something's in the distance, it can look different or whatever. The idea the grass literally looks greener over there. But the reason why it's a genius, if that's true, is because the premise goes, if you were to walk to there, the phenomenon would work the other way. And then you'd look back like, oh shit, it was greener back over there. It's like, no, it's just where you're stood. And so my point to these players would be, you might make a player, like you might get the player you want, but then suddenly you might be the guys in the quarters watching G2 win the tournament instead of being the ones almost beating them in the semis. So I also think you're gambling a lot when you're as good as Vitality is, because like I said, the floor on this team is phenomenal. Like they almost are. You can pretty much guarantee this team's in the semis. It's pretty rare they're not.
Is Vitality phenomenal enough, though, for ZywOo to be the best player of 2024? Is he going to get it?
I mean, one thing I do think is interesting about that discussion is people don't seem to realise it's just because Na'Vi doesn't have anyone that we put in that convo that's such an amazing discussion, isn't it? Because the others all do, like you say, take turns having the tournament they win, the tournament they do bad at. So I think the good thing is for me, he's still in the convo. Like, I actually think people have gone too far trying to decide that call. The great thing about the major ending of the year is it feels like it's going to ride right through the major. Like, whoever has a really sick major has a chance to like just steal that whole thing, like legitimately though. So for me, I personally put him 3 of the 3. I have m0NESY as my number 1. I also always tell people with Donk, I don't say he's not number 1. Like, I don't think he does anything wrong. I just think, I don't know. To me, in Counter-Strike, a bias I have is it's one thing if you get the kills and you like open the round, but somehow the person who closes the round feels like the winner, which is more m0NESY to me. Donk's like the guy who brute forces the game open. Yes. So I think you can have these 3 in any order, in my opinion. It's pure preference. But I have ZywOo 3 right now. But I'll tell you what, if he carries the whole major, he's the MVP. That might change. Who knows? Probably won't. I'll be honest. Probably won't. But I'll say it's possible. You know.
I'll say whoever goes the furthest. So whoever finishes the highest in the major will determine who gets further. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So I think if Vitality can win it, then he gets it. But if G2 goes further, then I rate it to m0NESY.
It's looking bad for Donk at the moment, then. But okay. It's not looking so great for him at the moment. But all right.
I think
if Katie had any dreams, those are gone too.
m0NESY wins it for me, just like, and this is just as a Counter-Strike enjoyer, purely off of style points.
Oh, it's
like
sick.
The amount of
for sure.
times, like if you had to say, can you name 5 insane ZywOo highlights? Sure, I probably could from this year alone. But m0NESY is just like bam, bam, bam. I can name you 10. Like, it's beautiful, and I don't know how much that actually impacts the whole top 1 conversation. Probably not at all. But from just an entertainment perspective, m0NESY wins, hands down.
And on that note, you can let us know in the comments who you think is your player of the year. And you can also tell us what you think about the Vitality roster rumors and how far they'll go in the major. Let us know, and we'll see you soon for another episode.